the human skeletal system is made up of the axial and the appendicular one. Let's know what are the parts of the axial skeletal system. The axial skeletal system is made up of the skull, have a look here, the ribs and the vertebral column that runs at our back, the vertebral column. The appendicular skeletal system is made of appendages. What are the appendages in man? We have the forearm, our forearm, the hind limb. This is our hind limb. You must be interested to know what are the bones that make up our forearm. Well, these forearms help us in lifting any objects. When we hear the ring of a phone, we pick up the receiver. It's once again our forearm that is helping us. Here are the bones that make up the forearm. The anterior arm bone is the humerus. It's also the funny bone, probably because of the word humerus. It is 1. Radius is the posterior arm bone, also 1 in number. Ulna, the posterior arm bone, 1. In the hand, that's actually in the wrist, we have the carpals, 8 of them. The metacarpals, the palm bones, are 5. Flanges, the finger bone, 14. To tell us more about the bones of the forearm and also something about the pectoral girdle, where it is found, we have Mauna with us.
The bones of the forearm is hinged to the pectoral girdle. Well, about the pectoral girdle, in mammals, 2 halves of the pectoral girdle are situated at equal distances from the ribs on the dorsal plane. Each half is called the shoulder bone or the shoulder blade. Each is made up of a triangular and a flat bone called scapula. From it, an outer projection arises, which is called acromion. It has a cavity, which is called glenoid cavity, where the humerus articulates by forming a ball on a socket joint. This joint helps in the movement of the forearm. Well, about the clavicle, which is the second bone of the pectoral girdle. In humans, this bone is commonly known as the collarbone. Now let's have a look at these bones in the chart. The first is the bones of the forearm. The first one is the humerus. The second bone is the radius. The third is the ulna. You have the wrist bones, the carpals. The palm bones, the metacarpals, and the finger bones, the phalanges. Well, about the pectoral girdle, the 2 halves of the pectoral girdle are situated at equal distances from the ribs. This is a triangular and a flat bone called scapula. From it, an outer projection arises, which is called the acromion. This has a cavity called the glenoid cavity, where the humerus articulates by forming a ball and socket joint. The second joint of the pectoral girdle is the clavicle. In humans, this bone is known as the collarbone.
If the forearm helped you to attend to a telephone call, and if you were far away from a ringing telephone, what took you close to the telephone? Definitely, those have been your hind limbs. The study of the hind limbs is equally interesting, for it has the largest bone of the body in it. Let's have a look at the bones that make up the hind limbs. Femur is the bone of the thigh, 1 in number. Tibia, bone of the leg, also 1. Fibula, also the bone of the leg, is 1 in number. You have the tarsals, the bones of the ankle, 8 in number. Metatarsals, bone of feet, 5 in number. And the phalanges, the bone of the fingers, 14 in number. To tell us more about the pelvic girdle and the bones of the hind limb, we have Mauna with us.
The bones of the hind limb. The first one is the femur, the largest bone in the human body. The second bone is the tibia. Tibia, the bone of the leg. Fibula, the bone of the leg. Then the tarsals, the bone of the ankle. You have the metatarsals, which is the bone of the feet, and the phalanges, the bone of the fingers. The bone of the hind limb is hinged to the pelvic girdle. Well, the pelvic girdle. It consists of two similar halves. Each half consists of three bones, the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. The pubis of both halves are joined, and this is called the pubic symphysis. The ilium and the ischium form a cavity which is called acetibulum cavity, where the femur articulates by forming a ball and socket joint. A hollow space is found between the ischium and the pubis, which is called obturate foramen. This allows the passage for obturatory nerve, vein, and artery. Well, the next one is the difference between the pelvis of male and female. The pelvis of female is much broader, bigger, and occupies much space than the pelvis of man. At the time of childbirth, the pubic arch, the obturate foramen, the pubic symphysis, and the ischium becomes loose and provide the space for to-be-born child.
The axial skeleton is made up of the skull, the vertebral column, and the rib cage. One of the most important functions of the skeletal system is to provide protection to the internal organs. And here comes a beautiful example of the same. Our heart, lungs, and liver are extremely important to us. And let me tell you, nature has provided a natural protection, an extremely good protection to these vital organs. Well, a rib cage in the thoracic part of our body protects these vital organs. What is the rib cage made up of? You must be knowing about it. If you run down your finger, and especially in skinny children who are thin, or when you breathe deep, you can see your ribs very clearly. We have 12 pairs of ribs. Now let us study how these ribs are arranged, where they are attached, by using a chart. Have a look at the rib cage. Your ribs come in pairs. The right and the left side of the ribs are identical. Clearly see, there is a broad, bold bone along the mid-ventral line, which is called as the sternum or the breastbone. As mentioned earlier, we have 12 pairs of ribs. 7 pairs are attached to the sternum ventrally, and dorsally you will find they are attached to the spine or the vertebral column. This picture shows more clearly how the ribs are attached to the spine at the other end. These 7 pairs of ribs are called as the true ribs, and note carefully, 3 pairs of ribs, that is the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, is attached to the sternal part of the 7th rib, which in turn is attached to the sternum. Here you can see 2 pairs are free floating. Mind you, they won't float away, but they are not attached to the sternum, but they are prominently attached to your spine.